Hey, this is Danny from Weird and Wired, and this is a very short scale bass. It's no secret that I am a huge fan of 60s, 70s budget import instruments, and that is exactly what this is. There's no brand name on the headstock of this particular bass, but I have seen this same model online with the brand name Kent, along with the serial number 5591462 and a made in Korea sticker on the back of the headstock. Short scale basses usually have a scale length of around 30 inches. This bass, however, is 24 inches. That's even shorter than your average full-sized guitar scale length. I've owned a couple of these super short scale basses and they're so much fun. I absolutely love them and they really work well for me as someone who's predominantly a guitarist. I can play this comfortably and I can come up with ideas that I wouldn't necessarily come up with on a full size or even a regular short scale bass. But I'm not going to be able to do much playing with this in its current state, so let's get it together and see what it can do. I gave the pickup a quick tap test and thankfully all of the electronics were working, albeit with a crackly volume pot. I then took off the pick guard, control plate and bridge saddle so I could give them all a deep clean. I left the clamshell bridge tailpiece on as none of the screws were moving, so I decided to avoid dealing with a shredded or snapped screw and I buffed it using steel wool. The pickup was secured to the pick guard with one screw and one nut and bolt. I imagine this was a homemade fix rather than from the factory, but you never know. The control plate had been painted blue. I'm all for personalising and decorating instruments, but I wasn't really a fan, so I took it off again using some steel wool. After seeing how dirty the potentiometers were, I felt lucky I only had a crackly volume pot to deal with. I cleaned them up using a little isopropyl alcohol and used contact cleaner to remove the crackle. I wrapped the ground wire around one of the bridge posts for a more secure connection. The neck was in pretty good condition overall, a little bit dirty and worn with a small piece of binding missing, but it was as straight as an arrow. Again, I removed all of the parts to give them a good deep clean and soon found out that what I originally thought was mostly wear turned out to be mostly dirt, but it still has a grey worn look to it. The trickiest part I find when working with these super short scale basses is stringing them up. Even short scale bass strings are too long for the end of the string to thread into the machine head. However, you can cut the string to a suitable length and then uncoil the wrap wire from the core of the string. For this Kent bass, I found that 2.5 centimeters was enough to work with. I then added a dab of super glue to where the wrap wire had been cut, and for some extra security added a little piece of shrink wrap tubing. The string is now thin enough to thread into the machine head and tune up. So now this has got some strings on it, we can get a better idea of how this is looking in terms of it being a functional, playable instrument. I generally find with these 60s, 70s budget import guitars and basses, you have to give the neck a pretty sizable shim to give it a playable action. The action on this bass, however, is absolutely fine. I don't even need to touch this. The other problem that I generally run into is the intonation, and I can show you on this one, hitting a 12th fret harmonic on the E string. We've got ourselves an E, fretting down on the 12th fret on the E string. we've got ourselves near enough a very flat F. So that's not gonna do, but it's a pretty easy fix. We just need to relocate the bridge saddle, give this the proper intonation, and then we can give it a proper play. I moved the saddle back about 1.5 centimeters. It's not the most intonatable bridge, but intonating it using the E and G strings and having the bridge at a slight angle gives it its best chance of playing in tune. And now it's all back together, let's see what it can do. So there we go, this Kent bass back in one piece and playing again, and what a joy it is to play. As I mentioned before, I've had a couple of these super short scale basses. I absolutely love them, and this one is no exception. I find I play these basses in a very particular way, which isn't quite like a guitar or quite like a bass. It's somewhere in between where you can get your thumping low end, but you can also do some more kind of widdly lead stuff. That being said, would I say this is a great all-rounder? I would not go that far. In fact, I was immediately reminded of the main sort of drawback I find with these, certainly as someone who likes to throw a lot of fuzz on and attack it with a pick, is that you can't really give it all that much force with your pick in hand or even your fret in hand. Going a little bit too hard with either will just pitch the string too high and it will just be going out of tune with itself, which doesn't make it ideal if you want to be playing this with other instruments. However, that does make me think, well, how can I play this in a way which is getting the most out of it? And for me personally, that means I've got to think of ideas and approach them in a way which is a little bit lighter and softer than I would generally go for. And I love to do that approach and that method when I am trying to get creative and think of ideas that are exciting for me. The pickup on this as well, I really like it, but it is a little bit microphonic, so it picks up any sort of taps on the instrument, which, you know, isn't always ideal. But again, you just got to work with what you're given and you can get some really cool sounds and ideas out of this. It is certainly a quirky piece and I love quirky instruments, but let me know what you think. Are you familiar with these super short scale basses? Have you owned one? Have you played one? You let me know all of your thoughts and feelings, and until the next time, keep it weird and keep it wired.